Good morning. My name is Frank Messina, and this is the January 3rd, 2023, Happy New Year, meeting of the Chatham Historical Commission. Before we start, we have a number of announcements that we have to make. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting here or at home, please notify the chairman. Seeing none, thank you. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 6, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain provisions of the COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law 3820, until March 31st, 2023. This meeting of the Chatham Historical Commission is being conducted both in person and via remote participation, and it shall support adequate alternate means of public access via Microsoft Teams by calling the phone number 508-945-4410, conference ID 325-805-403 hashtag, or by joining the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Hello, Steve. Despite our best efforts, we are not able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. The next order of business is the roll call, which we have to do because the meeting is being conducted both in person and online. One of our members is calling in via Microsoft Teams. Okay, the roll call. Vice Chair Bob Lear.
Yeah, virtually present.
Okay. Steve Burlingame.
Present.
Ben Smolodzinski.
Here.
Stephanie Hamilton.
Here.
Jane Moffett. Jane's not feeling well and probably not joining us. Don Aikman.
Here.
Alternate Sandy Porter.
Here.
Alternate Janet Tennyson.
Here.
And the chair is here. Thank you, Frank Messina is here. So we don't have any votes per se, formal hearing, but so both members of the, both alternates, Sandy and Janet, will participate. And any informal votes, they will be informal, so nothing that I think we need to formalize being an alternate member voting. Okay, having said that, we have no hearings today, but what we have is two items that I have been trying to address recently. And, sorry, we have to do the minutes first. Thank you very much. Okay, we have the minutes of December 20th, 2022, which you all received and hopefully had a chance to look at and look over. Anybody have any comments, open suggestions or corrections?
Could I move that we accept the minutes of, let's see, what date?
December 20th.
January 3rd, 2023. Oh, I'm
December
sorry.
20th.
December 20. I have just had cataract surgery, so I'm not seeing.
You have a second?
Yeah.
Second.
Second by Mr. Aikman. Any other discussion? Okay. Roll call. Bob?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ben?
I wasn't here, so.
Your microphone's not on.
He said he wasn't here.
I wasn't here, so I'm not gonna vote.
Well, I think you were here and then he left. So you were here and there.
Well, yeah,
I'll
I
accept
talked
your
to
abstaining.
Christina about that. Somehow I was getting cut off in the middle, and I didn't know why, so
Okay. I
I
think
changed
that's it.
carriers, and that may be the difference.
Okay, so we're going to list Ben as abstaining. Stephanie?
Yes.
Yes.
Jane's out here. Don?
Yes.
Sandy was absent. And Janet was here.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Minutes are accepted.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right, now let me put some things in perspective. We've got more people here than we normally have, which is interesting. I have two items on the agenda which I put forth for discussion. And as I indicated, they were two items which I'd been wanting to think about and to do something about. And being we didn't have any hearings, and I know how everybody really didn't want to have no meeting, so I put them on the agenda. There are two items. One is I'm going to read it for the members of the public and those present. Preliminary review for possible update of the Marconi RCA National Register District in relation to the Archaeological Reconnaissance Survey from March 2009 to be updated. Also, updated information not detailed or included in the original National Register nomination related to the role the Marconi RCA site in Tennefield, Roberts, etc., played during World War II and the U.S. Navy. That's the first item on the agenda. The second item on the agenda is the process for mandatory referral for the Development of Regional Impact, DRI, review to the Cape Cod Commission in accordance with the Cape Cod Commission document, October 2019, referring historic properties to the Cape Cod Commission. I just wanted for us to go over ourselves, to review the process. You know, we had a little hiccup the last time where we referred something. We went to send it to the Cape Cod Commission, and we really hadn't done, in my opinion, as chair, done enough homework to list the amount of information necessary to guide the Cape Cod Commission, and they really wanted more information. And as a result, the applicant withdrew, and that's 75 Main Street. So we're just going to have a quick review. I think everybody's had the copy of it, and Christina, you're going to put it in the book when the books get done. I think it's good to have. You know, some of us have been on the commission too long. I sit down to myself, and you know, we take things. We just, that's how we always did it. Well, guess what? You know, and there are new members, God bless you, you know, who need to bring board up to speed on the process, and I just wanted to review that. That's pretty much it, and there's a couple pieces of correspondence that we'll discuss. So let me put the first item in perspective. The Chatham Marconi Maritime Center. In full disclosure, I was involved with the Chatham Marconi Maritime Center before it became the Chatham Marconi Maritime Center, and I think I got involved because I was the few Italians in Chatham who can properly pronounce the word Guglielmo. And so I had been involved for 20-some years in the Marconi. I'd since left for the last 10 years and moved on after a number of years. But back in 2000, if you look at some of the correspondence I gave you, I think it was 2005 or 2004, a young gentleman who was a lot younger than him by the name of Ed Moxon, who happens to be in the audience, said, "Hey, Frank, you know, we should revisit the guidelines and the boundaries of the Marconi National Register designation, because it was not done correctly, in his opinion, in terms of the antenna field." So what you have, and I provided to you a correspondence, and one is from Terry Whalen, goes back to 2005, when we first asked Terry about is it possible, because at the time, quite honestly, the town wanted to take down all those antenna poles. They thought they were a safety hazard. And the Marconi folks did an analysis and showed them they were not a safety hazard. In fact, they were using them. So this thing goes back a long time. So it's about 15 years. So they've been talking about this. So recently, as a result of that correspondence, and you have in your possession an official copy of the National Register of Historic Places registration form. So you have that. It was provided to you. So you have the form. Now, the original National Register application in 1993-94 was actually performed by the owner of the property, MCI. MCI had purchased the property from Marconi. And there are a number of people in the audience, if I don't get it right, I'm sure they're going to raise their hands and correct me, okay? So MCI owned the property. At the time, the town MCI was looking to get out of the business, okay? And they had this big piece of property. They wanted to develop it. The town did not want them to develop it. And I think MCI smelt the fact that if they donated it to the National Register, they could get a really nice tax credit. And so they're the ones who did the application. I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Norm Paikin yet, and I will, because I believe he was involved, but the vast majority of the research and the boundaries were done by MCI, okay? And it was kind of limited, in my opinion, because MCI was trying to minimize how much they gave to the National Register, so they had enough property to potentially do some development. Because at the time, there was actually a move in town to put housing up there, which then fell by the wayside when MCI found out they could donate not only the property in North Chatham, but also the property in South Chatham, which was the receiving station, and they got a really even bigger tax advantage. So that's a little bit of history of where we are. So that was item A. Item B, this organization in 2009, the Historical Commission paid for and completed an archaeological reconnaissance survey in which we hired an organization called PAL, and this was an archaeological research company which did an archaeological survey of the entire town. Now, you have copies, you have been given copies, and as soon as the scanner works again, Christine will make sure she sends the copies of the redacted version of that. I feel like this is a secret report, because there's a lot of black in it, okay? And the reason it's black is that the public version of the reconnaissance survey does not tell you where things are. They talk in general comments. But I know for a fact, in my own personal knowledge, having looked at the unredacted report, there are some significant archaeological resources on the Marconi RCA site. That site effectively is virgin land since Marconi came in and put the poles up and so there wasn't a lot of disturbance of the land. So we never really did anything about it. I don't know, we all just got busy with life. So this raised its head again, and I just thought it was time to take another look. And finally, I apologize, Ed, that was 2005 when you asked me to do something about it. It's only 15 years later, so, but I wasn't chairman of the Historical Commission then. I think you were, Don, so, but, so it's just something, we just never had a time to get around to it. And because it's in the news again, I felt it was worthwhile that the commission take an independent look at what is being asked, and then we would decide, the Historical Commission would decide, well, maybe it is worthwhile that we would make an amendment. I've been in touch with Sarah Korjeff, who's our preservation consultant of the Cape Cod Commission. I've been in touch with Jennifer Doherty, who is the Mass Historical Commission representative for Chatham. And I said, well, what if we decide to do that? If we decide to make, he says, oh yeah, you can do that. You can make an amendment, but you have to have a reason for it. You just can't say you want to do it. And so my purpose here today, without spending too much time, is I've asked some members of the Chatham Marconi Maritime Center, its president, Bob Fishback, and is Dick here? All right, he's hiding in the back. Okay, two members of the Marconi Board of Directors to give us a quick overview of what are we talking about? What is the significance of the antenna field, and what are the significance of that district, whether it's worthy? Remember, it's not our decision. We can put some stuff together, and it would go to the Mass Historic, and they would say, nah, forget about it. Or they, and it's the same thing we went through with our friends in Stage Harbor, Stage Harbor Road, and our friends in South Chatham. The Mass Historic can say, yes, it's eligible, or no, it's not eligible. And then there's a normal process. Now, independent of this, just so we know we're not in cross purposes, the town, in the form of Terry Whalen, I guess his principal projects, is doing an independent research of whether or not the town wants to consider doing this. This is not the first time the town has thought about using this land. So this is somewhat independent, but yet it's not. So I'd like to keep it independent, because our purpose is the National Register district sanctity of it, the district, and whether it's worthwhile. Nothing else to do, because the town can make a decision. The town owns the property. People have to realize, just because something is on the National Register, it's not to say you can't develop it. You know, it's a process. You got to go to Mass Historic. You got to go to the Cape Cod Commission. You know, and there could be things done for trade-offs that something could be developed. If you have a contributing structure in the National Register District, like the Marconi buildings or the towers, you're definitely never going to get permission to take them down. But land is a different story, okay? So we'll have to see where we are. Is that, anybody got any general questions before we start? Okay, yes, Ben?
I thought the reason for the protection in the original agreements here was to protect what was underneath the ground at that specific spot, and that this would not be made public knowledge for the people who are out looking for souvenirs.
You're talking about, that's correct, and that's why the
And,
report is redacted.
Okay, and that's why it's redacted, but what I'm getting at here is what has changed. The stuff is still in the ground. It still needs to be protected.
Yes.
And we're messing with it when we
Let's
should
not,
let it.
I don't want to make any judgment. You know, but that area of the land was not included in the district.
Originally.
In the 1993 National Register District, it was not included, that part of the property, A. And B, even if it wasn't in it, if in fact there is Indian or archaeological resources, there's a process. Like if there's a cemetery, that's not to say you can't dig it up and use it, but there's a process you have to go to.
Well, see, I'm wondering, just from that, what sort of protection we're gonna have, and if it wasn't included, why is it redacted?
Why was it what?
Why is it redacted?
Why is it crossed out?
Well, it's redacted because the report is public, but what's redacted is the specific information of the location of those resources. Am I making sense, Ben?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, it's like,
Let's put it this way. 95% of Chatham, there are archaeological resources, either from first period colonial, our forefathers, Mr. Nickerson, or prehistory, all over the town. Trust me. Everywhere you go in the town, you can dig, and you talk to some people who've lived here more than the 30-some years I have, they talk about finding Indian, Indians lived here, and that's what it is. Okay?
yeah, well, all right, good, but they're not redacting your property, and I don't know. If something has worked well for 15 years, I'm a little nervous about changing it for whatever reason, and at that time, the people thought it was important enough to, I don't know how you put it.
Well, let me restate it
Hide
another
it,
way. Can
you
I say it
know?
another way? The fact that an archaeological survey was done is one thing. That gives it a certain level of identification and limited protection. Part two, if that same area was made into a National Register District, then it receives another level of protection. I'm with you?
Yeah.
But let's, I don't want to focus this commission, because none of us are archaeologists, on the issue of the archaeological survey. I wanted to focus initially on the antenna field, which is a separate issue, okay? Let's deal with that. we have in our agenda, sorry, this is getting long-winded, in our agenda, we've been asking for the past year and a half for money from the town. We asked from community preservation, and we were turned down a couple of times for money to update the report. The town of Chatham has agreed in the form of Ms. Donovan that she is going to attempt to find funds for us so we can update the 2009 report. We're going to be updating the 2009 report with the results of the Nickerson family dig and the Atwood dig. So the 2009 is a long time ago, okay? So there are things. So, but what I'd like to focus on first, if I may, okay, is begin and ask the Marconi folks to give us a quick overview of what their thinking is, starting back in 2005 and why we're here. Bob, why don't you come up? I've asked, Bob, introduce yourself. In addition to that, by the way, you have a number of pieces of correspondence which I provided to you, which is documentation from 2005, and also a piece of documentation from 2008, written by Dick Lumpkin. We also have that, Bob. Dick provided to us this morning. So anyway, I don't want to take your thunder. Why don't you just give us a quick, introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like to tell us.
Okay. Good morning. I'm Bob Fishback, 220 Countryside Drive, if that matters.
Try to speak as close to the mic as you can.
Swallow the mic. I'm the president of the board of the Chatham Marconi Maritime Center. I'm joined here today by some of the members of the board, Liz McCart, Ron Ferris, Ed Moxon, Dick Cracer, and David Smith. And I'm sure one or many of them will correct me when I stumble. So thank you for hearing us out. This will be, as Frank says, an overview. If you come away from this meeting understanding that the antenna is not the wooden pole stuck in the ground, it is the wire hanging from the wooden pole, we will, Ron and I will have considered that we have achieved step one when we get visitors into the museum to understand what an antenna is. Okay, so just basics. Frank has already touched on some of this. The National Register District filing was prepared in 1994, covering the years 1914 to 1944, because they could only go back 50 years. So it did cover most of the World War II activity in scope. The write-up is actually pretty thorough, and it talks a lot about the antenna fields and the significance of the antenna structure to the history, as well as talking about the buildings and the lattice towers, the contributing structures, the physical contributing structures, but it emphasizes those as the justification. As Ed has told us, Ed Moxon has told us, there are a number of historical justification elements that are inaccurate or incomplete in the filing, and that's simply based on what they knew in 1994, and Chatham Marconi's in researching for the museum content and for its own archives has unearthed essentially new information from 1994 that simply isn't in the scope of the filed approved National Register District. The antenna fields were not included in the National Register District. Even though, as I said, there's a fair amount of write-up in that document about the antennas and the significance of them. It's worth pointing out every time that Chatham Port is the last remaining intact Marconi-built wireless station complex in the world. That is to say, we have those 10 buildings that have been preserved, that the town has preserved, constitute the last intact facility that hasn't been, it hasn't had no structures added to it. And the core 10 buildings have been maintained all this time, 108 years. And it's worth noting that significant historical milestones occurred during the RCA years and U.S. Navy operation, particularly during World War II. So what did the filing miss? The antenna field for the Chatham Port Receiving Station was an integral, inseparable part of Chatham Radio WCC's operations. It's pretty axiomatic to anybody who understands radio that a radio station without an antenna is just a brick. It's not complete. The original 1914 kingpin mast base, foundation, and the 4 concrete guy anchor blocks up the hill from the operating building, in our opinion, are contributing structures and should have been included in the original district. Some of the wooden poles that supported historically significant antenna arrays, and I'll touch on that a little bit in a little bit more, such as the then state-of-art rhombic antennas, which were, if not introduced at Chatham, in no small part perfected at Chatham, might be contributing structures as well in that antenna field. The contiguous antenna field bounded by the operating building, the rear of the operating building in Chatham Port, Old Comers Road and Stillwater Pond, is by association with Chatham Radio WCC an unprotected historic area, in our opinion. And this, if you place yourself in one of those lovely mansions on the bluff overlooking Riders Cove that you can see from Route 28, on their front porch in 1922, looking back toward the radio station, this is what you would have seen. The low-lying building in the center is the operating building, now the museum. The 2-story building just to the left is the hotel building, or now our education center. At the top of the hill was the kingpin mast, the one remaining mast of the 5 or the 6 that Marconi put up. And the nearest lattice tower between the 2 buildings on the left is in that scene the one remaining lattice tower of the 3 that are on the property that are contributing structures. Of note is you can kind of tell from the catenaries of the wires, the way they droop, which ones are holding up the mast and which ones are antennas. And if you look a little bit at it, you can see that there are a lot of antenna arrays strung from that mast. And now I'm going to mess with your mind a little bit. Where you were standing on the other side of Riders Cove is now in the upper right on that diagram. And you're looking back, let's see, do I have a mouse? I have a mouse. You're looking back at the operating building, the hotel, and the kingpin mast on the hill. That's the base of the mast where the arrow is now. And there's an anchor right at Old Comers Road that everybody drives by every day and says, what is that? There are, the other 3 anchors are still there. There's also an anchor on that property from the next mast that was taken down 1919-ish, Ron? But the key things are this kingpin mast that survived well into the 1950s in active use. The foundation of it is fairly substantial concrete with steel base of the mast cut off the day that it was downed. The concrete blocks are still there and fully intact 108 years later. And this is essentially the boundary of the area that we're talking about. There's a prettier picture coming up next. The actual National Register District filing now is this much. And this is a 1915 drawing, so the Chatham Port Schoolhouse building is actually there in the drawing, but it was taken down, I think, in the 20s. All right, now this is the same layout done in 2001 by Rizzo and Associates for the town. It shows the locations of the wooden poles, and there's a long report that goes along with their condition and so forth. A couple things are worth noting on this view. One is that, to Frank's comment, MCI had intended to chop up this area for house lots, in addition to the buildings that were here already existing. This is now all conservation land. This has been reverted into conservation. And I take it back. This NRD includes these houses on the side of the road over here. But I'm going to flip back and forth for a second. So you see that layout And what's here is they've denoted one of the anchors for the kingpin mast, a second anchor, a third anchor. The fourth anchor that's down here in the muck next to Stillwater Pond, they didn't even find. I know it's there. I found it maybe 30 years ago. I'm pretty sure nobody moved it. It's pretty big. And what else is missing is the actual base of the kingpin mast itself from this diagram. So let me get my mouse out of the way. So if you kind of visualize, that's the layout of the kingpin mast that was in that picture, overlaid on the topographical map of the hill currently. And the wooden poles, follow the ridge line for the height to carry subsidiary antennas and feed lines to the antenna arrays that were down in the fields across the street. Now, same drawing, same layout. We've mentioned, I think Frank mentioned rhombic antennas. If you need an expert on rhombic antennas, you see Dick, you see Ed, you see Ron, you don't talk to me. I'm a recovering engineer. They're still good at it. But I want to note that on this area that's in this piece of property we're talking about, that was not included, the antenna field piece bounded by Stillwater Pond, Old Comers, and the back to the building, that was not included in the district. 3 of the 6 significant rhombic antennas were located, as were their poles. And I believe most of those poles are still there. Are they not, Ron? Ed? Yeah, the poles themselves are there. Whoops, got ahead of myself.
More antennas.
And Ed has, if you really want to get into where there were antennas, Ed has brought,
We're going to reach a point.
yeah, yeah, we're ready to go as deep as you want to go.
Okay.
But I only brought my small shovel. They brought the big ones. My point is that we're into essentially World War II and post-war history with the consideration of the rhombic antennas and what they were used for. They were essentially, these are the center beams of those same antennas that you're looking at. And essentially, they point in the direction, they are sensitive in the direction of the long dimension of the diamond. So that one is 53 degrees, and it would cover, I'm guessing, Europe, the Baltics, that sort of thing. There were others aimed at the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, South America, principally South Atlantic. The very strong, useful directional antennas associated with the receiving station at Chatham.
Bob,
this-
let me ask you a question, just to,
Yeah,
almost rhetorical. Go back.
how far?
The kingpin mast, okay? Go back. What was the purpose of that mast, and that, was it just receive, or was receive and transmit?
It was strictly receive. The Chatham Port Station was a receiving station. The associated transmitter after World War II was located in South Chatham, as we're all aware.
Okay.
The associated transmitter prior to World War II was located from 1914 through the end of the war in Marion, Massachusetts.
So the kingpin mast was supporting a receiving antenna system.
A receiving antenna array. Right.
Okay. Then, at some particular point, I guess it was RCA, removed the kingpin antenna
They removed the kingpin mast, right.
and the mast and the antenna system, and then put the rhombics in.
They essentially overlapped.
It overlapped.
I mean, antenna and radio
Okay.
technology continued to improve such that you didn't need this
Okay, so the-
massive antenna.
the
And it was
function
kind
of
of
the-
getting old and rusty at that point.
All right. The function of the receiving station went from a general receiving station to a very specific receiving station, specifically what you pointed out in the following one, where they were located.
Right. Well, this one, which is the next slide, touches on, did you prepare this, Dick? Is this a Dick Cracer chart?
I had it, I don't remember.
Oh, I'm not sure where. This is a summary. Some of the rhombics were heavily used during World War II to intercept enemy and U-boat message traffic, whoops, where'd I go? Get my fingers off the,
I guess the point I'm trying to make, Bob, relative to the function of the station, it went from a general receiving station to a marine receiving station. And so the rhombics were pointed to the North Atlantic and also to
right, well,
Europe.
well, the core history. Marconi built the site as part of a global network of point-to-point radio stations, receiving and transmitting station pairs. His vision was to girdle the globe with a set of wireless stations that would compete with landline telegraph and undersea telegraph for essentially business message, commercial message traffic. That's what Chatham was built for. After World War I, Marconi was forced to sell out to RCA. He didn't go away poor. His company didn't.
So
But
it wasn't-
RCA operated it as a point-to-point station with Stavanger, Norway, for a year, and then, in their infinite business wisdom, converted it to a maritime station, maritime receiving station for ship-to-shore traffic. And that's what it spent the bulk of its career of the 20th century, from 1920 to 1988, roughly, 97, as. And the kingpin mast was used to support antennas that were for general non-directional receiving primarily, you're right. And the rhombics were strongly directional.
The fact that the rhombics were strongly directional and they just, quote, just happened to be pointed to North Atlantic and Atlantic and World War II
Yeah.
wasn't just a coincidence then.
Well, yeah. See, this
Just
is where
introduce yourself.
my little shovel stops functioning and we get a bigger one.
Just introduce yourself so we have it.
It's good.
It's good? Okay, Ron Farris. I worked at the station for many years. So to answer your question, Frank, the rhombic antenna wasn't even designed until the 30s.
37.
All right, 37. So Chatham was one of the first radio stations to employ its use. And RCA installed if you go back to that,
Which one?
just one more, there. So RCA installed the top three. And at some point in time, the Navy added some rhombics, and I believe that's the biggest one on the bottom there, I think was one of them, the 50, whatever it says. So in the initial days, the kingpin mast supported a rhombic in addition to other antennas. The mast itself is not an antenna, it's just a support
Understand.
structure. So I'll go back to the one that shows the mast. So in that picture, the longest sloping wires going out to the big lattice towers are antennas. The ones that are coming down and kind of closer in hand are mostly guy wires. There are other antennas in there. But in addition to that, there were telephone poles on the hill and on the backside of the hill that supported other types of antennas. You can't see them in this picture because this is primarily, the kingpin mast. So there's more there to consider than just the kingpin mast. But the rhombic turned out to be quite an important antenna after its development. And it supported the Navy's effort in intercept operations. But it gave them the opportunity to pinpoint service areas for the radio station. Prior to that, you had general purpose antennas that were somewhat omnidirectional and couldn't be pinpoint specific areas. That's what the rhombic gave us the ability to do, is pinpoint the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, South Atlantic, things like that.
Well, that, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And that's where I was, in reading the actual National Register, report, that's what I felt that was missing. They didn't say enough about what happened in World War II, the secret listening station, the U.S. Navy, the decoding, anything, nothing like that. It was kind of left out. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And I just wanted to clarify.
And,
Thank you.
and to be honest with you, even the early history of the station is very vague. I mean, it's not true. It was very critical during the 4 years that the Navy was there during World War II, but
It was
I
all
mean,
secret.
prior to that, Chatham, this radio station was one of the 10 largest in the world. All right, just think about that. little old Chatham. We got visitors coming to the museum, and they come in there and they say, "Wow, I can imagine all this happened in little old Chatham." This was a very significant radio station known throughout the world. And a matter of fact, I had provided a document where Pan Am inaugurated their radio service on board aircraft. And they talked about Chatham being the station that they would provide Pan Am World Airways with international worldwide coverage around the entire world, supported by our station, supplemented by our station in California. But Chatham was the key communications point for Pan American when they put radio operators on board aircraft.
Did we
So-
know a lot of the secret stuff until Dick Lumpkin came about?
I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, I know that Dick was a,
I know who Dick was.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Dick, I'm gonna try to generally, Dick was an officer or a first lieutenant or something at the station
Yeah.
during
Right, he
during
was,
World
he
War
was in the
II.
telegraph department.
And I
mean,
know there
the
was a lot of
tele-
information
teletype.
taken from the Freedom of Information Act, that gave us a lot more detailed information of just what occurred there at the station during World War II. That's the point I was trying to make. And I guess the point was, it was my understanding that we didn't really know a lot of what was going on there until Dick actually got
Right,
into
and there
it.
are some things that are still classified
Yeah.
that we still don't know about.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Bob, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And that is pretty amazing that in the last FOIA request that Donald Lumpkin made, some of the stuff came back as still irretrievably
Classified.
classified. So this is, to pick up where I left off, this is a summary in your handout of the significant antennas that were there, what they were generally used for. And to Ron's point, in the package that I've left with Christina, I have left these documents. A PDF of the plan view of the receiving station mast locations by J.G. White, which is that huge roll-up that Ed has next to him, if you want to see it in live as opposed to on the small screen. A monograph that Dick Cracer prepared about the antennas at Chatham that talk about the different kinds and when they came into use and what they were used for and where they and who developed them. There are 2 letters, reproductions of letters, talking about the introduction of the rhombic antennas at Chatham in 1937. One by a gentleman named Burns, the next by a gentleman named Fred Heiser, who was a station manager, reporting on the success of the initial operation and a little bit later the full operation of the rhombics. Some technical notes about how they were used in World War II by Dick Lumpkin that he left behind with us in 2006. An article that Dick wrote for the Naval Cryptologic Veterans Association Journal in 1996 that talks about generally the background of the station during World War II, who did what, to whom, and why. And the article that Ron referred to a little later, which is a good anecdotal piece of information about how the station was involved in various bits and pieces of history throughout that maybe never made the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, but were nevertheless historically significant. So from our perspective, where do we go from here? As I mentioned, the 50-year window is now 1972, which encompasses some of the post-war history, which are some of the 50s and 60s, which were and 70s, which were very active times for the station here in Chatham as a commercial ship-to-shore facility. One thing that Frank mentioned earlier that's changed is the sponsor, effectively. The owner of the property is now the town of Chatham. And in our humble opinion, the town ought to get to put their stamp on what's going on, what the filing says, since they are the keeper of it. So we recommend that we consider submitting an update. I'm not sure what the right buzzword is. Amendment, update to the 1994 filing based upon the facts that we know now, but were either unknown or omitted in 1994. And consider expanding the existing district to include the adjacent antenna field that we've been talking about, the triangular section. between the operating building, Old Comers Road, and Stillwater Pond. So
Well, thank
that's
you
it.
very
We'll-
much.
We'll
You've
take
given
questions.
me-
If you have technical questions, I'm going to defer to the technical
I
expert.
think if I have any more technical information, we'll start to glow. And I think what you provided for me, Bob, and I appreciate Bob and Jim and everybody else from the Marconi, and I was involved a long time, but I wasn't that involved from a technical perspective. I was more interested in trying to raise money, fixing the buildings up, and I, was very much aware of the work that was necessary and to be done, and it was like everything else. We've got a lot of things on our plate, and so I think what we'll do, if it's up to the commission, we'll at this particular point we'll think about it. We'll put it on an agenda for a future meeting, and we'll get some more input to the extent we think is necessary. And I'll get some information from Mass Historic over what a process, if anything, we decide, and then we have to make a decision. This is nothing we do unilaterally. I certainly would need assistance from the town of Chatham, because unfortunately, you have to hire consultants. You can't, with all the technical expertise here, that's fine. They still need preservation consultants to verify information and that's the way it works. So we would have to hire. We have a preservation consultant on our staff, but we have to pay him when we ask him to do things. So, if we decide to do that, that's what we would do. We would have a preservation consultant to go through the information, and I'm sure you have even more information that you'd like to provide, which we would make ourselves available, and then we would do and what would happen was that we would write a letter, a very simple letter, summarizing what you said here. In fact, I did already, and said, what do you think? And if Mass Historic says, yes, you might have a case there, and that's all, then it just starts the process. Nothing happens, it just starts the process. Nothing happens right away, trust me. It took us about, South Chatham, the whole thing was 20 years, but when I got involved, it took 5 years to make it happen. So it's a slow process. But quite honestly, just for your perspective, once Mass Historic gets involved, it's kind of like, okay, hold off, guys. We're going to take a look at it. And they kind of put any kind of a hold on it, for something to do it, and before anybody does something. Yeah, I'm sorry, Don.
Barbara has her hand up.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Barbara has her
Barbara
hand up.
Siegel.
Yeah, 1 second, Barbara. So anyway, that's kind of where we are, and again, this is not our decision. We don't own the property. We're just merely the Historical Commission for the town of Chatham. So at this particular point, if there are members of the public who would like to ask any questions or add anything, be happy to take a question or not. Yeah, sure, come on. Barbara, was she up first?
Yes.
Barbara, why don't you go first, and then you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Frank. It seems to be quite timely that your agenda item seems to have reappeared. Am I still on? Yes.
Yes, you are.
Your agenda item, is it a coincidence that it is popping up now, that there seems to be interest in putting a senior center on that antenna field? I just have a short statement I want to read, and I hope you hear me out. The June 10th, 2021 Cape Cod Chronicle editorial stated that it doesn't take a close inspection to see the failings of the current senior center on Stony Hill Road. Originally built as a resident, its rooms and offices are small and lack privacy. A steep staircase leads to a more constricted spaces on the second floor. It lacks adequate ventilation system, and the building had to be shored up a few years ago because of structural issues. When the article to build a new senior center at 1610 West Main Street in West Chatham was added to the town warrant, I got a call from Frank Messina about a working group that was forming to support the efforts to help win the 2/3 vote required to fund the project. Frank wanted me to join the group of concerned citizens and politicians. The group was later named Citizens for 1610 Main Street. We met weekly for months, developing supporting strategies. As you know, the project was not approved. We lost by 93 votes. And here we go again. The Citizens for 1610 was chaired by Frank, who wanted a new senior center. What are we supporting now? What, Frank, are you supporting now? The seniors need and deserve a new senior center. But now it seems that every effort is to keep us from exploring Old Comers Road property near the Marconi Center as a potential site. We are told that an ancient pole with a wire hanging is more important than old people. We are told that tree frogs, ducks, trees, etc., are more important than old people. At a select board meeting when the COA board requested a feasibility study at Old Comers Road property, a timeline was presented by Terry Whalen. He stated that if all the necessary steps were completed and the project was approved at town meeting, a new
Barbara, we may have
26.
lost you.
when did you lose me?
That's all right, continue. I think we got it.
Okay, I said, the seniors of Chatham need and deserve a new senior center, but now it seems that every effort is to keep us from exploring Old Comers Road property near the Marconi Center as a potential site. We are told that ancient pole with wires hanging is more important than old people. We are told that tree frogs, ducks, trees are more important than old people. At a select board meeting when the CO board requested a feasibility study at Old Comers Road property, a timeline was presented by Terry Whalen. He stated if all necessary steps were completed and the project was approved at town meeting, a new building would be ready for occupancy in 2026. In 2026, I will be 90 years old. I started working on that project in my 70s. In the past 3 years, I have lost 9 friends. My generation will be extinct. Will this group protect our bones? Thank you, Frank.
Welcome. Boy, Barbara, thank you for reminding me what I did for 2 years of my life in fighting for the Middle Road and also for heading up the 1610 Main Street group. And it was a tough vote, 93 votes that we lost. What do we call them? Caves? Chatham against virtually everything? And
That was
and
it.
we lost out. We lost out on 1610. We lost out on Middle Road. And trust me, Barbara, I have not lost my passion. I'm going to be 81 years tomorrow, so I guess I'm a senior citizen too. So no, I appreciate the fact, and I had been involved, with it, and you're right. Unfortunately, this has come up again, and one more time, I'm being asked by people who know a lot more than I do about the Marconi property, and we, as an historical commission, our authority and our responsibility relative is the historical preservation of historical assets of the town. So, I could serve two masters. I could serve, the Chatham Marconi the Historical Commission, the town of Chatham, and also I can serve the Marconi, the COA. I hope Chatham, can find a way, to make it happen. But, that's not our purpose here, to debate the viability of the COA. There's a lot of work that has to be done, and it's just not our decision. We have to focus on, let me just choose, get the other citizen before. There was another citizen who wanted to speak? Oh, that's not a citizen. Come on up. That's Mr. DeCastro, our select person. Sorry, Dean.
The last time I checked, I was.
I couldn't see that far.
I think I am.
He was sitting in the dark.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Nicastro, member of the Select Board, and your liaison. I'm also the liaison to the Council on Aging.
I'm sorry, I could,
Your liaison, your
Yeah,
board liaison.
right.
I also happen to be liaison to the Council on Aging, but I'm not here to speak to that issue. I'm always enlightened whenever I hear Bob Fishbeck talk about the Marconi, and the Marconi Center is a gem and treasure in the town, and we should support it, continue to support it. I just want to inject a note of possible caution in terms of where you're going to go with this. because it's my understanding, and I stand to be corrected, that this property, which, as you point out, is owned by the town, I believe it's under the control of the Select Board. I don't believe it's assigned to any particular department. I can be corrected by that, by the town planner.
The town, what the town of Chatham did when when MCI gave the property, you assigned the property across the street to conservation, you assigned the little triangle up front to recreation, and then you kept control. You didn't assign the larger Marconi site
Right.
to anybody else. So technically, it's the town of Chatham is the owner. That's
Yeah, what I'm
correct.
saying is, if you're contemplating extending the boundaries beyond the current district into the antenna field, I believe the antenna field is under the control of the Select Board. And
The
I'm
an-
just suggesting to you,
Yeah, well, I hear what you're saying.
before
and
you
if
send
you're-
letters to the state, that you come to the Select Board. And I'm not sure whether the Select Board's
I
going to
wouldn't,
disagree with you.
technically, we would not have to go to the select board.
We're
We
the
could still-
property owners, sir.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't. Well, you're going to make the same mistake you made on Stage Harbor Road, where you projected to the
That's
state without
absolutely
getting the
correct.
approval of the residents, and you
That's
lost
absolutely
out
correct.
on that.
You're absolutely right.
Right, so you don't want to make the same mistake here.
I ain't
think you
making
would-
any mistakes. I'm not doing anything yet.
No, I'm suggesting to you, I'm encouraging you as your liaison to come to the Select Board when you're ready with a recommendation.
If this board decides, after consultation with Mass Historic, that there is potentially a reason to do this,
Mm-hmm.
and there is potential for eligibility, we will do that.
That's
Before
all
we
I'm saying.
actually, let me finish my point. Before we actually submit a nomination, you're correct. The owner has something to say about it.
That's all I'm saying.
But relative to requesting Mass Historic to provide an opinion relative to its eligibility, that's a separate issue. We're an independent commission. Thank you.
Well, it's, your position is that the state of eligibility gives you some control, right? If you get a letter saying it's eligible,
We get a letter, I'm not sure of the actual details, which I said, I've only
Yeah.
begun the process.
No,
We
I get that, and
we
I'm
can get-
I'm not
Yeah, I
discouraging you
understand.
from continuing
We can
that.
get a letter saying, yeah, it's possible, maybe you should explore it.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's
I'm
right.
just,
And then it's up to the town of Chatham, our select board, our elected officials to say, yeah, we support this, or yes, we don't support it. I agree.
that's all. Then we're on
Yeah.
the same page. I just really that hadn't been mentioned, and I just really wanted to get
Oh,
that point
I
across.
understand that.
And I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I just
But,
wanted.
like I said, it was 2005 when somebody asked me the question.
Yeah, okay.
And all of a sudden, I asked the question again. Somebody asked me the question again, did you ever do anything about that? And I picked up my mail and I said, no, I guess I never did. I said, all right, well, and you're right.
No,
If something happens and we didn't do it, then it's shame on us.
no, I appreciate your interest
And
and
that's
your
all.
activity in this area.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
And,
make sure we understood that.
Ms. Siegel's comment, we worked very closely, for years, to try to make 1610
Right.
happen. So I'm committed to, and I would hope, if I could, being we're getting this dialogue, that the select board would make a decision and just do something.
You're preaching to the choir, because I've been saying that.
I know
I
that.
have not taken a
Yeah.
position on whether the Marconi is the right site for the Council on
Well, I'm
Aging.
feeling
but-
attacked.
Well,
Thank
you
you.
you shouldn't be. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. I can't find my letters.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Surely.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pat Burke, and I am the new chairperson of the Chatham Council on Aging Board. And I just have a question and a couple of comments. My question is, when the COA decided that the Marconi site may be a possibility for us, was that the impetus for you to reconsider the historical significance of that site?
We have been worried about the historical significance of that site for many, many years.
Okay.
And in fact, the last time the town, not the COA, considered it, the town has considered doing things on that site for many, many years, a lot of different things. And we have always been concerned about the historical significance of materials that were going to be lost. But it's like everything else. It's a big deal. We've got a lot of work to do. This is not the only thing we do, okay? But then again, this came in the papers again, or they're looking at it again. The town of Chatham, Terry Whaling is starting to look at it. And we said, gee, well, maybe we ought to take out the old papers and see why we were considering it. It's very possible we would go through this and we say, nah, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But it's our, in my opinion, the due diligence is, well, you take a look. And the people have a lot more enthusiasm about it than I do, and they deserve here, you folks, you shouldn't come to us. You should be going to Terry Whalen, and you should be going to the select board. And those are the people you got to convince, not me. Okay? And the
we
93
have.
people voted against 1610. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm not going to talk about 1610 because as far as we can see, that's no longer an issue for us. What I wanted to say is
Yes, ma'am.
in the very short time I have been on the board of the COA, there have been multiple sites. I have a binder this thick filled with sites. And at one of our meetings, Joe Gagliano, who I'm sure you all know,
Yeah, I work
happened
very
to,
closely with Joe.
pull this out of his hat, and we thought, okay, let's take a look at it.
Yeah.
Now, if I spent some time with Mr. Fishback last week, looking over, and he had some really good ideas. But what we would like to do is really continue to work with everyone, because we believe that we cannot build a new senior center without everyone's help. We need as a board to be able to listen to the ideas that other people have and walk away positively and think about, okay, what do we do with the information that we've received today? And I will bring all of this back to our board next Monday when we meet. But I certainly hope that we have all of your support when we get to a point where we will have a new COA somewhere.
You heard
Thank you.
You heard Barbara Seeger. I led that committee for a year, and
No, I know.
let me ask a
but-
question, being we're into this and not, there's a lot of conservation land in town.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, why don't you go get them and tell them the town to take it out of conservation?
So
You can do that.
one of those spots we looked at, I want to say Volunteer Park.
I'm not telling
Was
volunteer. I'm
considered-
saying there's a lot of land in this
Yeah.
town which is not Chatham Conservation Foundation, okay? Sorry, Mr. Lear. Which is Chatham Conservation land. We put it in, and you can take it out.
We can?
Yep.
Well,
I don't know why the select board hasn't thought of that.
Well, I'll have to talk to Dean about that. Thank you for the information.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of people working together.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you. I forgot where I was. Okay. Thank you very much, Robert, and I appreciate it, and I hope I'm not, sometimes you just got to ask the question. Yes, Steve, I'm sorry.
I have a couple of points, one of which is that I should make it clear to all the people that were watching this or listening to us, is that the discussion of the Marconi site and expanding the historic district portion of it is not something that the commission has considered in the past. I believe all of this is strictly from the chairman's perspective, to put this on the agenda for discussion. I don't think it's a bad idea to discuss it, but I want to make it clear that it's not something that the commission has worked on, discussed, or decided to put on the agenda. It was strictly the chairperson. Secondly, I guess for Bob Fishback, in looking at your document called Marconi RCA NRD Review, where do we go from here, or where to from here? One thing that I think you're going to run into, perhaps with this commission and perhaps with the state, is, you said, consider submitting an update to the 1994 filing based upon facts known now but unknown or omitted then. Somebody's going to be looking at you pretty carefully to say, what are the facts that we know now that we did not know in 1994? The mast was there. That's not something new. So, and I think that you need to be prepared to defend that statement that there are facts known now but not known then. Why weren't they known or made known back in 1994? I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me that it's the chairman's prerogative to set the agenda.
I understand.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if you feel offended by my putting it on the agenda. Anyway, secondly, you're right. But as I said earlier, it was not done by, it was done by the owner of the property at the time relative to what he wanted to include or not. But that's neither here nor there. Let's move on. I think we killed this thing. The second item on the agenda, and we got 20 minutes because we're getting out here at 12 o'clock, is you have information that was provided to you some time ago. Christina, did we send it out again?
No, I can project it on the.
All right. You're going to have to listen to me talk. The second item on the agenda is process for mandatory review of discretionary referral for development of regional impact, the Cape Cod Commission, in accordance with the documentation center. The document 2019 referring historic property to the Cape Cod Commission. My only intention here is to make sure everybody had it again. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay? And I think we've got to be a little bit careful. I one more time in the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, and Don before me, we put together our annual report to the town of Chatham about what have we accomplished this year. And I always take great pride in indicating that the Chatham Historical Commission in its, 30 years of existence or more, I think we referred 2 or 3 properties to the Cape Cod Commission, and it has always been, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, guys. All I'm just saying is that when we do it, we've got to be very clear and very sure we know what we're doing and asking the Cape Cod Commission to review it. Because, they're going to look at it and say, they're going to send it back to us. And like, you guys, you didn't try hard enough. And that's their process. So, it's when you refer to the Cape Cod Commission, it's what's called the development of regional impact. It's a big deal. It costs a lot of money in terms of legal fees and lawyers, make a lot of money. So I just want to be careful. And I guess my point relative to the mandatory review or the DRI referral, or as we know, we get a discretionary referral. If something is eligible, we can technically make a referral. We haven't had that case. We've been, luckily, we actually the only area we have which is eligible, which is not a National Register District, is Stage Harbor Road. Other than that, everything else that we've been lucky enough to get passed as a National Register District. But I want to refer to, I guess, no page numbers, limitation on deferrals. The concept, when the Cape Cod Commission Act was passed, they were very clear about the 25% single-family homes were exempt in certain instances. So they were separating a development. Thank you very much. She's too good. She was separating the development of regional impact for a single-family home versus somebody building a $20,000 square foot piece of construction property. So on that same page 6, which, can you get that? So the public knows what we're talking about. we talk about discretionary referral process, and I'll find it. Mandatory referral, excuse me, it's page 6. Mandatory referral for the DRI, okay? The Historical Commission is charged with reviewing the proposed alteration, exterior alteration or demolition of a National Register historical property that is not protected by a local historic district. The purpose of the Historical Commission is to review and determine whether the proposed work constitute a substantial alteration, that which would alter key defining characters of the building, threaten the building's continued eligibility for National Register listing on historic places. This gives the opportunity to work with the property owner planning major alterations to inform them the building's significance and guide them. I think we've been pretty good, and I hope we can continue to do that. And I know we will be. Please don't take this as where I'm taking anybody out to task from my perspective. But then they also provide some specific guidelines of when you should not do it, okay? Or when things, the kind of things that you should be referring. And I'm going to go all the way without spending a lot of time. There's a section called 5, Guidance for Determining What Qualifies a Substantial Alteration. It's very specific of what qualifies as a substantial alteration. Any determination of demolition of the original or primary structure building mass, which we do. And it goes on and on. But you don't have to read to you. You guys can read it. But the most important thing, I feel, is on the last page, which I assume is page 10, not the last. The following alteration should not be considered a substantial alteration. Alteration and additions that are limited to the rear or side facades and do not require removal of distinctive architectural trim or features. Change or alteration of properties that are not contributing structures in the district, and that's obvious. Demolitions of later additions that do not have historical significance. And of course, ordinary maintenance. And I guess that was read back to me, quite honestly, by Sarah Korjev, in looking at a recent submission. So she's saying, that's what we're looking at. And if you're going to send it to us, you better be very specific, or else it's going to come right back. And now I know there's a difference of opinion by some of us that the Cape Cod Commission is taking a not as strong a view as we would like, but that's where they are, and that's the end of it. Ben has had it with us. How do you feel, Ben?
So glad you're here, Ben.
Great.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. I really don't have anything else other than the couple of items that you have relative to Sarah Korjev on 127, as well as the neighbors from 127, and the correspondence from Sarah Korjev relative to the referral of 75. So I think, was Katie wanted to say something about the E? Or Ryan was going to say something?
I don't think so. If there was.
Did she give you any information about the Form Es?
There was a CPC application that she was referring to, but I don't think she was going to be speaking on it.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Can you say that again?
There was the application, the previous CPC application, but I don't believe anyone was going to speak on it. It was just information for you at this
Okay.
point.
All right, I'll take care of that. I guess that's it. My hope springs eternal, Steve, to get some money. And the only thing I owe you guys is I owe the letters. When is your next CPC meeting?
Next week.
Okay. I will get the letters out today. Thank you for your patience. Unless there's no other business, we'll have a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second by Steph. No discussion. Bob?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ben left. Stephanie?
Yes.
Jane's gone. Don?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Sorry. Janet? And the
Yes.
chair votes yes. Thank you very much for your patience, guys.